I've saved all my energy for today for this 1 hour, so I'm hoping that I'll get through it. But it might be that Mark needs to go. I think you should have mentioned this, John. Or John, I think you should go on to this. So I'm asking Mark to back me up. But together we will get through the presentation. We've got a presentation, but I want to just before we start just say a few things about the JCNA and also about you people out here. We were just celebrating before some of you came on the fact that Stoke Susan Clark is now in the Guinness Book of World Records for the most mammoth cream tea party ever held in the globe. Now, that's a wonderful thing in itself, but it also tells us something about Stoke, doesn't it? It tells us something about the power of partnerships in Stoke. And from a distance, I've seen that grow from when they applied to be a city of culture, through the compact, through to now, that power of partnership, bringing people together, not just the cultural sector, but other key stakeholders in the city. So that if you want to put on a tea party, that's quite an easy thing to do. It just means Susan making one dial on her phone and everybody will be there and supporting a tea party. And I know that because you've got established compacts, that'll be true of your places as well. You understand the power of partnership. You're working closely, not just with the cultural sector, but with other multiple stakeholders as well. And that, my friends, is 3/4 of it. You're already 3/4 of the way along towards having a JCNA. And so I just wanted to explain why that's the case. We first launched, we did the first JCNA back in 2019. I think it's interesting to note that that was because at the time, the head of theatre at Arts Council England was Tariq Iskander, who's now artistic director at the Battersea Arts Centre. And Tariq had come from the National Health Service. And he had a very sort of strong sense of, every local authority has to produce a joint strategic needs assessment, setting out its health priorities and how it's going to address the health challenges in their local authority. And they have to do that by working together and aligning all the service stakeholders and everybody else to a common set of themes and ideas that they're going to deliver. And also that's based on evidence. So what Tariq's ambition was that the planning for the arts and culture sector should be the same. It should be done collectively. It should be based on data. It should set out a clear set of ambitions and outcomes, and it should set out ways in which that was going to be achieved. So the first JCNA guidelines came out in the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. And obviously we then went into COVID, so it all got a bit lost. But just to say that the early adopters of the JCNA included Coventry, who went on to be City of Culture, Bradford, who went on to be City of Culture, Southampton, who went on to be shortlisted for City of Culture, and why can't I get the London Borough right?
The London Borough of Wandsworth, who went on to become London Borough of Culture, and the other early adopter was Derby, who've subsequently not used it to the same extent as the others, but have used it in planning their activities.
So those early adopters, it was very successful for those early adopters. But, at that time, 2020, not many local authorities had strategies, compacts hadn't been really thought about. So it really, the real thrust of the document was about partnership, and bringing partnerships together, but having a very kind of clear sense of what it is that culture could achieve in an area, and maybe realistically what could it achieve in an area. So that's the kind of background of it. So you already are in powerful partnerships. So we're going to take you through it, but what I want to focus on is the 7-point plan itself, because it seems to be the structure and logic of that 7-point plan that is effective, particularly with Arts Council, local government, and other stakeholders. So Mark, can you put up? So there it is, working together to serve our communities. I mean, it sounds working together to serve our communities, I suppose, but it seriously is about that. It's not about what can a place do for culture. It's absolutely about what culture can do for a place. It's absolutely about looking to see what contribution that culture makes, in addition, obviously, to the value it has in and of itself, in addition to entertainment, in addition to everything else it does. How can it help with some of the priority needs in a place? So that's the kind of idea of it. Next slide. Thanks, Mark. So it kind of makes sense, what is a joint cultural needs assessment? Well, it's local government. When we brought out the new guidelines June, we changed the audience. In the first guidelines, there wasn't really a particular audience, and smaller cultural organisations and smaller compacts without very much power said, well, this is really impossibly difficult to do. And what we understood over time was it's absolutely crucially essential that local authority is engaged in this in some way. I think at the time that we did the first one, Arts Council in particular had a kind of prejudice towards local authorities. Imagine that local authorities would take everything over and ruin everything, But actually, in our view, you can't do a JCNA unless you're engaging local authority to some degree or another. So it's joint, working with local partners to deliver change. It's absolutely about maximising art and culture investment and opportunity, so bringing investment and funding into arts and culture, but not just from the usual sources, also from public health, from education, for levelling up funds, what other sources of funding might be available in an area. Needs, so it's about identifying, prioritising a range of cultural, social, economic, health and environmental needs, leading to evidence-led and outcomes-driven arts and culture planning. And the plan itself is consulting on and agreeing the outputs and cultural outcomes that will have the most impact on local needs. And that kind of end piece is what you're already so well set up to be able to do. We should say something about the scale of users. You are all cultural compacts. It works best, I think, at that sort of scale where you already have an established partnership and you're looking for a direction and a plan to guide that partnership. It's not something an individual arts or cultural organisation could do on their own, really, unless they were quite large and had a big reach and a big, and a lot of capacity to spare. It's best for, we talk with Erica about having a JCNA for the West Midlands. That'd be hopeless. Coventry is about the right size. Stoke's about the right size. So some of the other areas represented on this are about the right size to do it. But the degree of complexity, the scale of your JCNA will absolutely depend upon the size of your place, the capacity, what resources exist. There is no one size fits all. As I said, at the heart of it is the 7-point plan and adapting that to however big or small or how established your partnership is as you go ahead. So if you just move on, Mark. So as I said, the idea is based on a joint strategic needs assessment. These are statutory responsibility for every local authority to produce one of these annually and to set out, based on evidence, what the real health inequality and challenges are in their area and how services will combine to deliver change to those outcomes. I mean, in the current climate of costs, sometimes these JSNAs now are a bit aspirational, as in what we would like to do is, rather than we actually have the resource to do this. But it is a commitment for a local authority, all the stakeholders in a local authority, to work together towards a common ambition. And that's absolutely, at the heart of what we're talking about. And also Sorry,
just to add to that, it's upper tier local authorities who have the statutory requirements. So Warwick District, for instance, don't have one because Warwickshire County Council do, and Nuneaton Bedworth don't have one because Warwickshire County Council do. So it's the upper tier local authority, but that is currently up for consultation, where it may change to lower tier local authorities, because the Department for Health and Social Care are very much aware that when you're at the upper tier level, some of the areas are too big and too ambitious.
But Tarek's point was that if you've got all the services in an area working together to address some of the health challenges, why aren't we doing the same with culture? And why aren't we seeing culture as a major enabler in terms of dealing with some of the challenges that are set out in the JSNA? So if you look through the right hand of the page there, what I've underlined is where, I as a cultural person went, oh, well, culture can contribute to that. Culture can do that. Culture can help with preventative health. We do it with young people and mental health, for instance, all the time in so much of what we do. Some areas are more diverse, which should be a consideration when reviewing service provision. Again, culture is a way of celebrating the diversity within our place and making sure that unheard voices get represented. Culture is very good at doing that. utilising community assets to help address specific needs, present opportunities for residents to actively get involved. That's what your compacts are for. That's what CPP, that's what other place-based programmes are about. They're about getting communities involved. They're about engaging, they're about empowering them through cultural opportunity. Considering appropriate messaging to address local anxiety. Stakeholder groups are essential in addressing issues in specific neighbourhoods. Again, we use culture to do that, whether it's poetry or whether it's visual art or whether it's working with young people in workshops. Culture can communicate difficult messages in simple, when in accessible, enjoyable, informative ways. And in terms of integrating newly arrived communities, again, depending on the place that you serve, you will already be doing a lot of work in that area in terms of culture. So you can see how culture fits within a broader appeal. The next slide, Mark. Actually, no, just go back. Sorry, I haven't quite finished on that. So why is this approach important now? Well, I don't know what it's like in your place, but in Coventry, 83% of the entire City Council budget now goes on SEND, looked after children and social care, leaving the remaining 17%, whatever that is, sorry, my math's no good, for everything else. For everything else. And I think what that means realistically is that if culture's looking for any kind of investment, it has to show how it will contribute to reducing demands for statutory services. So the work you do to improve to alleviate loneliness, the work that you do to work on mental health, the work that you do on well-being, the work that you do on inclusion, these are all contributions to areas which would otherwise have a considerable cost for the local authority. So I think it's become absolutely essential in terms of future investment to absolutely align cultural objectives, cultural outcomes, cultural activities with the core key challenges and needs identified in a place, both the cultural and the non-cultural. I mean, it seems to me that that's also in the situation, in the times in which we live, and the ethical way forward to understand that there is no resource, there is no money, and that we've all got to pitch in together to help address the really core key priority needs within our place. So that's the spirit of it. Now, we talked about the JCNA being a data-led, evidence-based plan. So although all of you will have, lots of local knowledge, lots of local understanding, lots of communication with communities, with audiences, with participants, the JCNA assumes that you're going to do quite a lot of work in nailing that, so we can be absolutely certain that what you know about your area is supported both by local knowledge but also by data. Now, that was quite a challenge for some of the early adopters, but it's just been made brilliantly much easier for you to do through the work that Mark has been doing with Culture Central. So Mark's now going to take you through what data is now available to you, and is accessible, and will give you all the sources that you will need in order to put a JCNA together. Over to you, Mark.
Yes, so obviously it is a needs-based assessment and you have to have evidence of those needs. So data is important. So first of all, number one is a sneak peek. It's not actually out until a week today, which is quite scary. But there will be, as part of the wider West Midlands Cultural Research Project 2.0, which has been taking place, a report is going to be released next week. But also part of that is we are releasing a Creative West Midlands profiler, which has data from across the West Midlands, from the DCMS participation survey, a survey which was run regionally specifically for the project, all about participation, creativity in the West Midlands, and how that links to certain factors such as demographic profiles within local authorities, where you can see how local authorities compare to the region and in other senses. So that is the first source of data, and that is coming next week. I believe there is a webinar happening at 10 o'clock next Wednesday, and I think there are places still available if you wish to sign up to that to hear more about the research in general, but also be one of the first to be able to access the data tool specifically for the region. the next major source of data, which was made available last year, is the Arts Council England's Culture and Place Data Explorer, which has got a lot of metrics within it that can be used to identify places, but you can also use that tool to run local authority profiles in terms of demographic profiles from the census in less than 30 seconds. So the data is more widely available. There's also Local Government Inform, which is through the Local Government Association, which most local authorities will have subscriptions and logins for, and within that, there is over 1,900 different metrics that you can go and play around with if you wanted to. That's quite a lot. So we've hopefully brought some of those more to the fore in the Creative West Midlands profiler. And then obviously the Census 2021 is a main source of data that is available through the Office for National Statistics. Again, for the West Midlands, all of this will be available through the Creative West Midlands profiler.
Now, all of this has not been done just for people to do JCNAs. You know, it's been done because it's critical for us to understand in the kind of detail that we now can, you know, the places that we serve and who participates, who doesn't, what the demographics are, etc. And that's obviously become increasingly critical for any kind of funding applications or any kind of proposal that you might make. So it's got that kind of general use as well, but it certainly makes doing a JCNA a lot easier. Claire, thanks for asking what the difference is between a JCNA and a cultural strategy. I've said it out loud now because I think I'm going to cover it towards the end of this presentation, but if I don't, then it'll remind me to be clear as to what the difference might be between a cultural strategy and the JCNA. So if we move on, Mark. So all of that is looking quite complex and difficult, and those graphs and everything else are looking a bit, oh my goodness. But at the heart of the JCNA is a 7-point plan, which is very simple, very straightforward. It may well be very similar to what you've already done in a cultural strategy. And it's the plan and the logic of the plan which seems to have an appeal both for places and helping people to understand how they're working together and what they're working together towards, but also seems to be very attractive to funders to see that you have this very kind of clear map of what you're doing and you know where you're going with it. So it starts, of course, with the place, narrative, vision and profile. So absolutely, as all of our work does, begin with what's your story, you know, what makes your place different from any other place, what is its history, where does it come from, where is it going, what's its vision, what's its aspiration, what's its ambition, what is really, really special about this place, and how can culture enhance, enable, be part of, obviously, as well, that narrative, that story of who we are and who we are becoming, and real clarity about that. What makes you special? What makes you different? But some of that, of course, will also then be tapping into data. So that if you say that you're a diverse place, well, how diverse? You know, what is the proportion of different backgrounds, different demographic differences that you have in your place, and also an understanding of, you know, within your place, are there particular clusters of people from maybe from different cultures, or people facing different levels of challenge, or people who are more likely to participate in culture than others? Are there areas of the city which have certainly missed out on publicly supported culture? You know, all of that is about defining what your story is, what your vision is, what your profile is, what it is that makes you different. And then the second stage is place outcomes. So these are not cultural outcomes. What is everybody in your place working towards? What is public health working towards? What is education working towards? What are business interests working towards? You know, what are the real key top level outcomes that get you heard if you're talking to power? You know, what they may not think of culture as being the first and foremost priority, but they may have other priorities. So the challenge is to identify what they are. And just as when I went through the JSNA outcomes and you could see where the opportunities for culture is, it's that kind of exercise of looking to see how the needs and challenges, future needs and challenges of your place are being expressed and who they're being expressed by, and being very clear about what those are, and to what extent do those outcomes respond to some of the challenges that you might have set out in stage 1 of the plan. And then stage 3, I think, is what's really, really important. And that's being very, very clear about what the cultural resources and capacity are that's available to you. Because if your desire is to bring about change in your place, that has to be dependent on the cultural resources and capacity that you have available to you. And I think sometimes in the past, we've promised more than we could possibly deliver because we've not been realistic about what we have available and what we can bring together, and therefore not realistic about the level of change that can be made. So it's partly an audit, and you've probably already done this as part of Cultural Compact, but it's also about these place outcomes. They're likely to be bigger than the cultural sector. Your cultural sector can deliver on its own. They're likely to be bigger than that. So let's be very clear before we go on what it is. What do we have? Who's involved in the compact? What's the capacity there? What's the capacity of people to work together and put additional time together to support a JCNA as well? And then the next stage is from that, well, let's think about the cultural outcomes and KPIs then. We've got the big place outcomes. We've thought through realistically what it is that we think we can achieve. So now we can define some cultural outcomes. Given what we've got, we think that in the next 2, 3, 4 years, we can achieve the following. And these are ambitions for change. These are measurable changes that we think that we will be able to achieve in a given time. Once you've achieved got those outcomes, the next stage is to think about, all right, well, in order to, and I'll take you through a model of outcomes later on. All right, so if we've said that we want to increase participation in some of the areas of our place that have had historically low levels of participation, your outcome will be increased participation in areas with low levels of participation. So therefore, what are your cultural outputs? What are you going to do? What are you going to do to contribute to that change? You're going to do a music festival? Are you going to do school workshops? Are you going to do theatre pieces? Are you going to do parades? Are you going to have food festival? What is it that you're going to actually do in order to address those challenges and contribute to the change? And again, how will you measure those? And once you've got all of that in place, then it's about activities. All right. So in order to do these things, what do we actually need to do? What's the activities? What's the busyness that we need to all get involved in order to make these happen, and to be clear that what these things, when they happen, will contribute to change in these ways. And then finally, of course, how will we know? So to have a monitoring and evaluation strategy from the beginning, and I'll come back to that later, which helps us to understand whether we've been successful in what we set out to do. And then that obviously feeding back into the place narrative, vision and profile. What is the difference we've made? How has it changed our story? How has it contributed to our story? How has it moved our story on? So that's the 7-step plan. And whatever else you may or may not do, I think it's that plan which is very, very helpful in just thinking through what it is that you can contribute in a difficult period of an uncertain investment and resources. Next one. And at the heart of all of this, of course, is what you already have, which is an ecosystem approach to change. No single organisation can do this on its own. A local authority can't do it on its own. It requires all of us working together, having a clarity about what our shared ambitions, what our shared outcomes are, buying into the idea of a JCNA and what it supports, being clear about what our responsibilities are within it, and having an ecosystem that includes all of the stakeholders who are needed to work together to make culture a transformative change agent in place. And I'm sure that within your cultural compacts and those of you who have CPP experience, you will have this broad range of stakeholders. The important point, obviously, and you will understand this, that it's not just cultural stakeholders, it's the education system, it's local and regional government, it's commercial sectors, funders, investors, and absolutely essentially, and at the heart of that, communities, being brought together, consulting, working together, and deciding in what ways each stakeholder can contribute to the outcomes that have been identified in the JCNA. But this is why you're on the screen, because you work in this way. And next slide. Yeah. So Coventry City Council have just commissioned a new JCNA. We had one back in 2020, and we've just done a new one now, which is partly because our own work towards a cultural compact has been quite slow and difficult, because we had quite a painful recovery period from the City of Culture, and it's taken us a while to get ourselves sorted out. And this JCNA is very much of the moment. It's very much, in a period where there is very little, in a period where the City Council is really struggling to cover the needs of the community, and asking questions about how culture can best contribute to that. This was commissioned by the local authority, and it was very much about the cultural officers, or the cultural capacity in the local authority, saying to the cultural sector and to other stakeholders, look, the only way that we can justify continuing funding in culture is if we can demonstrate very clearly how culture contributes to what we in Coventry call the One Coventry Plan. The One Coventry Plan sets out 5 key priority areas of challenge for the city, which include dealing with inequalities, dealing with health inequalities, dealing with climate crisis, amongst others, which we'll go through. And the commitment in One Coventry Plan is that all the services of the local authority, all the services of the local authority, are all working towards those same impact areas. Because any theory of change, and there is this kind of sense of theory of change running through all of this, the premise is that change is only possible if we all work towards it. If we're all working off in different directions and doing different activities and different outputs which aren't aligned to the same common ambitions, you have no chance of creating change. It's only if we can all lock our work down into, absolutely supporting and being aligned with a common set of ambitions that we have any chance of making change. So that's what the JCNA was supposed to do. What are the key priorities for the council? What are the cultural outcomes that can contribute to that? And we'll look and see how that plays out in one of the impact areas next, Mark, I think.
Yep.
So on the right, this is one of the impacts from the One Coventry Plan, improving outcomes and tackling inequalities within our communities. Now, a lot of the elected members will be thinking in terms of health outcomes, housing outcomes, educational outcomes, financial, economic inequalities. They'll be thinking in that way. They won't necessarily be thinking in terms of cultural inequalities. But we're a city that believes that inequalities are all intersecting, that those who have low health outcomes, have low housing outcomes, are likely also to be least participating in culture for historical reasons. So cultural inequalities is one of these inequalities. So what we've set out in the JCN outcome is how can culture contribute to improving outcomes and reducing inequalities within our communities. So we've defined these as cultural leadership and programming as representative Coventry communities. I'll give you a couple of minutes just to read through. It's always daft, isn't it, reading through the slide. That makes sense to you. They're what you would expect to see, I imagine. So these JCNA outcomes now form, if you like, a kind of service level agreement between Coventry's cultural sector and the elected members and the people of Coventry. This is what we will deliver in terms of contributing to change that will alleviate the impact. And we've done this for each of the 5. That's our agreement. The cultural strategy, Claire, will be what's decided by the cultural sector in terms of the outputs and the activities. So if these are the service level agreement outcomes that we're all agreed to work towards, what will we need to do? And what will we need to produce in order to make those changes possible? So the next 2 columns will be outputs and activities, and that will be that's what the refreshed 10-year cultural strategy will do, is to set out, this is the resource that we have available to us. This is what we need to do. This is what we need to produce in order to contribute to these service level outcomes that will satisfy the City Council in terms of how does culture contribute to the One Coventry Plan. And finally,
but just to add on to that, so whilst the cultural strategy refresh in Coventry is being led by a citizen-led Culture Works group, these service level agreements here are also filtered out to the organisations which Coventry City Council support in terms of regular grant funding or management funding. So the Herbert Art Gallery and Museum, for instance, their KPIs for the City Council are set based on the JCNA, and the same for the Belgrade Theatre and others in the city. So really it's where the council's investment is going into cultural organisations, those organisations are expected to support the wider place outcomes in the JCNA.
Okay, and finally, and perhaps most importantly, I mean, we're in difficult times in terms of resourcing and funding and even keeping what we've got, let alone having more. But the other intention in this, of course, was that it should be a learning cycle. It follows the patterns of the old action research cycle, which anybody who's been involved in education or the health service will be familiar with. Identifying a problem, proposing a plan to deal with that problem, acting on that plan, implementing that plan, reviewing, reflecting, and seeing what changes there. So it's also assuming that as you go through the JCNA planning process, you're thinking about, what is the need for change? What is your ambition and narrative for change? And that means collecting and reflecting on baseline data. Based on the resources, what can you realistically expect to achieve? And that's where you develop your JCA plan outcomes, outputs and KPIs, and capture data needed for indicators. So how are you going to do that? Through surveys, workshops, audience profiles, creative work, artistic work. How are you going to capture responses to what you're actually doing? Comparing results from data with expectations, reporting on progress towards impact and ambition using evidence, and then going back, what is the need for change, and so on and so forth. So it's a kind of continuous cyclical path that you're taking. All right, that's the end of the talking at you, and that leaves us a bit of time for chat and conversation. So let's turn off the screen and let me have a little look back through what we've got on the other. So how much did it cost to do Coventry's JCNA? It cost £7,000. But me and Mark did it, so we're quite cheap actually, because of where we are, it needed to be very detailed and comprehensive. And as I've said to you, it will certainly be less than that for you guys, A, because you're smaller places, and B, because of what Mark showed you earlier. That data is very, very available now to you. To be able to find the baseline data and everything else that you want. And a lot of the work is people do go out to consultants to write them, as they do, but a lot of the work is about bringing people together and making decisions about what needs doing and who's going to do it and how is that going to contribute. But I think primarily making people who, funders, whether that's your place authority or whether it's Arts Council or whoever, or WMCA, whoever, very, very clear that you are absolutely contributing to alleviating the priority needs and challenges of your place, that the place and their needs come first, and it's about what culture can do in the service of communities, as we said at the beginning. What else? Post the link. Here we've got that. So Claire, did that answer the question about the difference between a JCNA and a cultural strategy? It's Claire, she's still there.
Yes, I am. He's still here. Sorry, yes. I was just having to stand up because I've been sat down for so long. Yes, thank you, Jonathan.
I mean, cultural strategies will take different, but I think, what we actually do, if this is the resource that we have available and we all agree these are the needs of the people that we need to address, then it's absolutely down to the cultural sector to decide how best they can work and how best they can, what they best can produce and what they can best, how they best work together to contribute. But I think that idea of the cultural sector, if you've got cultural officers of any kind and local authorities, making that agreement with elected members, I think that's been really key for us in protecting funding for the cultural sector.
Hannah's got a hand up. Hannah?
Yeah, it was just a question. Obviously, you've said at the moment it's all been done in upper tier authorities. Have we got any feeling around how local government review will impact this, and whether, as we move into a new era, they might be conducted across whatever is formed through local government reviews?
Yeah, we're not sure anybody's got any kind of clear idea about that, but just to run back over what you said, I mean, I think local authorities have to be involved, but any enlightened local authority will not want to be the boss of this, and will not want to be running it, will not want to be telling the culture sector what to do. But they do have the expertise and in some cases the resource and the connections across other directorates, other services to be very useful in that way. And I think it's about, you couldn't, as I said earlier on, you couldn't have a JCNA for the West Midlands. So I think it is the sum total of the smaller JCNAs within the combined authority, that when they go through devolution or whatever, your place is very clear about what who you are, what your story is, what your importance is, what makes you more special than anybody else, and a very clear sense of how culture in your place contributes to addressing the priority needs of people. I think it's a good preparation for whatever might happen, to have that clarity and to have that knowledge and to have that understanding. I think is a very good defence, and a preparation for whatever changes may come.
And it's just to add, the upper tier local authority that's the joint strategic needs assessment, but that's become very clear that it doesn't necessarily work at that larger geographic area. For instance, South Warwickshire NHS Trust, the full name evades me for the minute. They really struggle with Warwickshire's JSNA because a lot of it covers what's not in their area, and they've got different priorities. So they've got a lot of rural communities, which is very different from the north of the county. So that's why they identified that it doesn't necessarily work. So the focus is for these community-based needs assessment is really down to more smaller local areas.
And the quality of data improves all the time, and accessibility to the quality of data. So part of the problem in the past is that things like Arts Council taking part and participation, they don't work at the level of granularity for place, I mean, Coventry as a place does all right in terms of participation, but there are deep, deep, deep pockets of inequality and difference within the city. And that's what you need to be able to understand. And we're now getting that granularity of data that enables us to identify the differences and inequalities that exist within even quite small places.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I just concur, actually, do we need to, yes, of course we have to, Hannah, work within the local authority or work in partnership with the local authority to do them, but actually is there an opportunity for those second tier local authorities to get ahead of this before devolution changes happen? So like you say, maybe that's an opportunity as well, to think about more place-based stuff. Simon, you've got your hand up.
Yes, and thank you for that. I've just been reflecting on what's being sort of presented there. I think in a way we have sort of already delivered. We wouldn't have called it a joint cultural needs assessment necessarily, but in all of the work and the consultation that we've been doing over the last nearly 2 years, actually, ever since we started Cultural Statement of Intent, and the more recent work that was done through Creative Concern in Manchester, who were appointed by the Cultural Compact to do the new cultural strategy framework, which is now live and is going to be launched in the autumn formally to the wider sector. Took us a while to get it through the council, but we did eventually. So I think we don't need to go back and do another piece of work. You might contest that, Jonathan, but we're on a path already now within the cultural strategy compact, within the compact and the cultural strategy, where there are 6 priority themes, many of which cover the same sort of identified needs that you've sort of illustrated. And the compact have already decided on what the 3 priorities are for culture in the city, which is A, funding for culture, B, infrastructure and the use of underutilized spaces and places for culture, and C, third one is attracting more major cultural events and institutions to the city. That's not to say that I don't think at some point in the future that we would want to do what you've done, which is to refresh the cultural needs assessment for the city as a future piece of work. But the danger is for us is that people are talked out already. We've done a lot of consultation, and going back to do yet more is going to be adding to the burden, if you like. The other challenge we've got, and you talked about local authority investment, is that we've got no investment in culture. We are, Claire and I, literally are scouting around for other sources of funding, whether it be enterprise zone funding, this latest round of shared prosperity fund to be called economic place strategy fund. And we've also, in terms of socializing this work internally, met with the new managing director, who's asked for a business case for culture. So we're working with City Ready, for example, in drawing together enough evidence and information that is talking more about the economic impact and value for a city of culture, rather than it being more around, sadly, more about the engagement and reaching communities that are not being reached. But that's the landscape that we're in at the moment. So I just some observations from me about what you've just been talking about, and I think where we are. I'm very pleased that the compact is dynamic and it's engaged with the good broad cross sector of people. We're lucky to have a new public health director, Sally Burns, who's come in, who really gets culture, and I'm sure she'll be another valuable component of that compact, because along that with that comes investment from public health into health and well-being for our citizens, and they're already doing some really good work in the city about that. So I'm rambling a bit now, but I'll stop there.
No, I mean, we're certainly not. Yeah, I mean, we're certainly not selling it. I mean, you'll be all different places, and I'm sure a lot of you have nodded and gone, yeah, well, we're doing all of that. I think there are some key principles, and again, Simon, you ticked off a lot of that. I think it's really we need to take data and evidence really, 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 really seriously, and we need to lead arguments for investment, against data-led and data evidenced argument. I think being realistic about what we can achieve and what we can't achieve. I mean, if you've got no investment, that kind of limits what you're able to do. So therefore, you need to be very clear, given there is no investment, we're not giving up. We still think that we can make a major contribution. So therefore, we're going to focus on areas which are about reducing downstream costs, like public health, like education, like this justice system. That's where we're going to go, because we're not going to give up just because no one's investing in us, whatever. So I think that's really important, that clarity about what you can do and what you can't do. And I think what's also really important is that the place outcomes come first, not the cultural outcomes. And if there is a cultural outcome, like increasing the number of institutions in the city, all right, well, how's that going to contribute to the larger place-based outcomes? So, like others on the screen, Simon, I'm sure you already, signed it. So it wasn't about selling it really. And it's an idea that's been around now. And obviously a lot of it would have been adopted in different kinds of ways. But I do think there's something about the logic of that 7-point plan, even if you've got the bits of it, that actually going through it in that order and setting it out in that order, which has clearly been very successful for a number of places. So,
Sorry, and Simon, and I think what's obviously working very closely with you guys and the compact on the work, it'd be really interesting to think about how maybe, and just to be very clear, where it isn't about selling it, this is about saying this is what the process is. We've agreed as a network that we want to trial a few of these along, like Coventry have done theirs, but we wanted to trial it in a range of different places for the compact network to be able to, so yeah, it might be that we choose somewhere that's a bit rural. Paul, you might be interested in what that looks like in Shropshire, for example. You might look at that city focus, and we might and that's what we need to just kind of wrangle with, really, is we haven't got resource for every compact at the moment to be able to necessarily have their own JCNA that we can fund as part of our IPSO, but actually trial it in a few places where we can learn as a group about what the benefits have been, what are the challenges that have been, what is potentially what the change is made, and what the data is. Also potentially in terms of Culture Central, thinking, okay, this is the data that we've got, Mark, all of the stuff that we're bringing together, actually when we start to process it in certain places, is there some gaps, is there things that we need to be thinking about in terms of making that case. So yeah, I think I'd be interested, Simon, to think maybe in 12 months' time, when we're looking again at the framework, the cultural framework, and doing a bit of review about where we've got to, what the distance is. Maybe it's about measuring it against that 7-point. Do you know what I mean? Kind of going back to that and going, actually, is it doing the things that are in that 7-point plan?
Ruth.
Yeah, I've just
Can I
got a hand up.
Can I just
Oh,
add
sorry,
a very quick point on that? Just in terms of the places who were part of the pilot JCNA in 2019, quite a significant amount of the funding for cultural activities within those places has actually come from typically non-cultural funders. So that because they've been focused on place outcomes, they've been able to go to different pots of money. So some of the cultural investment in Bradford, for instance, has come from the NHS, and the NHS is not a cultural funder. But because they've been able to really demonstrate that actually by using culture as the vehicle to improve certain aspects of people's lives, they've been able to harness that investment. So part of it is about repositioning culture as a preventative community asset, and that's why the having a place's cultural strategy is important, because we have to remember culture is also art as well. It's not just about improving for doing things.
Ruth.
Hi. Thanks, that was really clearly set out. Now, I've not heard of a JCNA until today, and so I've been listening to it and trying to work it out as to how that fits with what we do. But in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's very similar to a cultural strategy, but it's a framework that links with place-based local authorities and really links directly to their council plan, rather than a cultural network of people who've come together to do the strategy. Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
And in that case, what is then your vision, or the vision, if everyone, say, had a JCNA, what would that vision be for the region? How would that then contribute to a better cultural outcome for the region?
So I think sometimes within a place, and and even regionally and even nationally, that you get this sense that there's a sort of top table where all the powerful people sit and talk about powerful things like economy and health and education and housing and all of that. And then over here at a little side table are the cultural people having a conversation about what does culture need, how do we make culture strong, how do we make culture grow. And I think this is about saying we're not going to sit at the side table anymore, we're going to sit at the top table with you. And we're going to be very clear about how it is that we contribute to the powerful things that you're talking about. And we're going to make it very clear. We're not asking for, we're not asking you for anything for ourselves. We're asking you to support us so that we can support you and be part of these conversations about, the really what people who don't live and breathe culture would see as being more important. How is it that we serve more important needs and ambitions for a place? See, like a cultural strategy can sometimes be a cultural sector strategy, can't it? It can be a strategy for the cultural sector rather than a cultural strategy, which wouldn't be necessarily even written by the cultural sector. They would be one of the contributors, but that would be as much written by health and education and other services as anybody else, because it's a cultural strategy for the place. It's not a cultural sector strategy. You understand what I'm saying? That kind of difference. So I think it's moving off the side table and putting ourselves up on the top table, which is the ambition of a JCNA approach, Ruth. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah.
And then I think just adding to that in terms of a regional perspective, I think what we recognise both as Culture Central and I think probably, across, we work across a really broad regional footprint. If you think about the West Midlands from Stoke to Worcester, Wolverhampton, it's significant. So one approach is not like, yes, we've got our collectively strategizing culture, which has got one approach that the sector wants to go in terms of high ambitions, but it's so important to have place-based activity and strategy, isn't it, that's directly related to the people and the place. And so for me, this is about going, how do you secure a direct place-based strategy that then contributes to a wider narrative and a wider argument for culture across the whole of the region, and recognising the importance and difference of place, but that we're all connected and all work together as a regional ecology. And I think if we're all doing similar things like a JCNA, or whether it's around using that research, Mark, you know, to be able to talk narratives around when the next MPO round comes round, you know, whether we're constantly talking about the creativity measure that's going to come out in that research. That we're speaking as a region, but in a way that directly responds to the people that we're working with. Does that help?
That's hay fever Erica's got. She's not choking up with emotion, look. So she's got hay fever.
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry, my friend. Jonathan, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I've been trying to there's a lot of stuff that's happened. I think some of my thoughts and feelings echo what Simon mentioned. Our compact's struggling because we're a district. We've got 4 towns with each separate identities. I imagine similar to Stoke and various other places. But I can see this. I mean, we did a lot of this stuff with the creative framework, but you presented it much more beautifully, and it's easier to kind of see the journey and the lines that go through it. But I could definitely see it working at like town level, so 3rd tier. But there's no resources there to be able to deliver it. But I think it's a useful exercise and a common language if other people are doing it that allows us to tell stories and join up thinking and stuff. But it's just resources. I mean, everyone's fighting for their lives at the moment. So yeah, more observations than any sort of questions.
No, I think that's right, and that's why I started with the scale question. I mean, a lot of these conversations around JCNA, you know, reference big places like Bradford, Southampton, and what else. You know, the examples we get are not smaller places, but every place has got culture, right? You know, whether that's amateur, you know, whether it's in areas of Coventry where, you know, our wrestling clubs are in mosques, whether it's your local, your local amateur theatre, whether it's whatever it is, there are people who are engaged in cultural activities who may benefit from coming together and saying, how can we be stronger, bring more members in, bring more people in, bring more visibility in by working closely together and planning also so that we can say to our place, however small it is and however little, look, this is what culture does. You know, this is what culture does play. I mean, you'll be aware of that in Leamington. You know, everybody's aware of the games industry and the creative industries in Leamington. Sorry, in Leamington. Everybody be aware of that. They're not less aware of the cultural resources, cultural assets, which are the very bedrock of the success of the more commercial creative industries, as you know, Jonathan. You know, so I think even in very, very small places, it's something about the logic of the 7-point plan, however brief it is, even if it's on the back of an envelope. You know, this is who we are. This is what matters to the place in which we live. This is what we've got. We've got, you know, a couple of volunteer groups. We got this and we got that. You know, together we could do something special. You know, we could do art in the park. We could do something. You know, there are things which don't cost. I think one thing that frustrates me at the moment, you know, I've had the privilege to work in South America and other places where culture is absolutely vitally part of everybody's life, but there's no money. There's no investment. There's no government money. They don't stop people doing things, you know what I mean? And I feel a bit of a frustration around that at the moment, that places that have been very well resourced in the past saying there are no resources so we can't do anything anymore. People still need culture in their lives. You know, culture, even if we have very little, what is it that we can still do? I mean, it's the only thing that gives me hope, and I need hope, otherwise I'd go right under, you know, tomorrow.
But that's so important. So I've got Matt. Matt.
Hi everyone. It's really interesting hearing about this, and I think I'm quite excited about the idea of, you know, a more place-based strategy for Sandwell, but also recognizing what Simon's saying around, you know, people being maybe a bit talked out, because, you know, in Sandwell we've done things in completely the wrong order. So in that the council have developed a cultural strategy that's very venue-based and focused on their services because they had to for the combined authority. The Cultural Compact has developed a strategy simultaneous to that, you know, and the two do talk to each other, but not entirely. And then there's also, we've just had a place partnerships bid successfully accepted that was put together by a consortium because the compact wasn't ready. So we've got all of these different things and different outcomes that all, you know, there are crossovers of partnerships and things. So I think this could be a great exercise in terms of pulling it together, you know, getting everybody on the same page and you know, hopefully the local authority adopting that framework as well and helping us talk better to them about culture and the impacts. I think that's a big issue in Sandwell. But yeah, I think it's just recognising that thing of, you know, if the Cultural Compact go to, there might be a challenge there in terms of actually getting people to buy into the process because they are slightly talked out around cultural strategies and frameworks.
Yeah, no, I completely get that, you know, but people are also perhaps, you know, like talked out because the talking needs to turn into action and needs to turn into results, and it's a sense which this might help you. I mean, in terms of Coventry, there wasn't a lot of consultation with the JCNA. You know, our work on the JCNA was with officers to decide a service level agreement with elected members, which elected members sign off. The consultation, the talking, then comes with what is our combined collective cultural strategy that will deliver these outcomes.
I guess that's the question that my comment was lacking, really. I guess, Jonathan, was what's the best way to implement this if you don't want to, you know, go through all those quite recent processes again? Can it be an exercise of sort of sifting, editing, going through?
Yeah, absolutely, cutting and pasting. Yeah, I mean, you presumably already articulated your story at once or so, and it's not just culture's story of your place; it's your place's story of itself, you know, and it's a kind of overall vision and ambition. You know, where does Sandwell see itself going? What does it see itself becoming? You can cut and paste that. You are looking at you know, you're using the data sources that are there and other documents that come out of Sandwell local authority to identify what the really important place outcomes are. You're doing the work around auditing what are our resources, what have we got, what's our capacity and everything else, and that's available from the sources that you're talking about. So you can go quite a long way, you know, and you may already have got cultural outcomes. Well, then it's just, well, let's look at what we've got. Do they really align with the key, you know, with the place outcomes, or do they need a bit of tweaking and refining so that there's clearer, you know, a clearer alignment with what really matters to people, you know? So I think using what you've got, but just reframing it around that 7-point plan, just to give it a new coherence, and then going out into consultation with people, particularly on the activities and outputs bit, you know, what is it that we're going to do and what is it that we're going to produce that's really going to make a difference to communities in our place. So I think cutting and don't think it's definitely about not starting from scratch. That's why, as I said, it's the logic of the plan at the heart of it, which is important. How quickly you move towards that, what you cut and paste, what you recycle, what you reuse, you know, what existing consultations and results of existing consultations can you already use. You know, we had a citizens assembly a couple of years ago, and that now fed into this document. So previous consultations, what's come out of that, what is the appetite, cultural appetite, and I think the problem that you raised of it's not just about the buildings, you know, the building-based organisations, it's much kind of more broadly than that. What is the responsibility of the building-based organisations to their people? You know, in Coventry, there's a real challenge around convincing elected members that residents in every ward of the city benefit from the Belgrade Theatre, for instance. And now we can use data and evidence to show that it does. But also, what's the Belgrade's responsibility to freelancers, to small organisations, to amateur theatre groups? You know, you understand where I'm going with that, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. In Sandwell, we don't really have any or many building-based organisations. No. So we're sort of, our cultural offer is quite unique, and I think that's part of the story.
But yeah, it is. But that's make that a USP, my friend.
Yeah. And I think what you said was
sorry, Matt, no, go on.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I think your key point around not being at the side table, that's really resonated with me. You know, that's something we're trying to push with the compact, is be at the public health meetings, be at the regeneration meetings. Yeah. You know, that's what got place partnerships over the line, was those conversations. So I think having that framework is really interesting and vital.
And I think there's something about this, isn't there, that speaks a language across all parties, if that makes sense. And so that often as a sector, I think, you know, it's very easy for us to talk about what we do and how we do it and all of the lovely impacts, but it doesn't necessarily have the same language of, like, the joint strategic needs assessment. Do you know what I mean? They are very specific languages that local authorities know and the frameworks that they know, so it's easier to build in across those various different departments. And I think this is about just changing the structure and the models and the language, isn't it? So like you say, we've probably got lots of it, it's probably there, and but recognizing, you know, Sandwell's very specific areas of, you know, deprivation, infrastructure, it, you know, it's very, very different than Birmingham, for example, and Coventry. but also the people are very, very different as well, and the needs of the people are very different. And how does culture then serve the people? I think, and it goes back to all of Culture Central's, and I hope the region side. It's the people. What are we doing? It's culture. Culture is for the people and the place that we live and work, isn't it? And this just articulates the benefits more broadly. And Jonathan, I'm going to leave on a little bit of aspiration because everyone's going. But yesterday, I was at a sharing event with Partners in Creative Learning, which is an organisation that I chair here in Stoke, which is doing work with children and young people, and just hearing the impact of arts in schools and education and all of the work that's happening there really reaffirmed why this work is really, really important to people listening about oracy or confidence or SEN children just really embracing a cultural programme. And that's 20 years in the making. And so these things don't happen overnight, do they? But we have to keep on making the case whether there's investment, not investment, because this work is really, really important. So that's just a little bit. I had a little moment yesterday, so I'm feeling inspired, which is not very like me. So we're 5 minutes over time, and thanks, Jonathan, for all of the stuff. And what I'm going to do is I'll drop everyone an email. I've got a bit more sense of the JCNA process itself. And we've got all of the research that is launching. I have put the launch in the chat. Please come along. I think you'll find it really useful because we're going to have not only the kind of state of the nation, we'll also be launching the profile, which will also look at your local authority data specifically. Can we have a copy of the slides, Jonathan? There we go. I'm just reading.
Yeah, Mark will send them over. Look.
Brilliant. And so we're going to probably look at trialing, and I need to speak with you, Jonathan and Mark, about how we pay for time or capacity, or who's the best person to kind of look at time and capacity to support some of the places to deliver their JCNA.
Yeah.
And we've got that investment to do some of that. So I think, we need to just select 2 or 3 places to be able to do that, and then we can all learn from how it's worked. Does that make sense? And just need to think about the criteria and criteria and breadth. But if you're interested, we'll have an expression of interest type of approach. Next meeting is in August. At the moment, it's not got a place focus, as in it's kind of, we haven't decided on a venue, whether it's going to be in person or whether we're going to do it online. Does anybody who's still left on this call have a preference? It's 21st of August, I want to say. Charlie, are you still there?
So, can I just say, there are 3 Jonathans on this call who all spell their names differently.
Yeah.
That's what makes us distinctive.
I was going to say, being August, maybe online's better. Because
sorry, there's only one way to spell it.
And
sorry, I'm really sorry.
And who's not. That's all I was going to say.
I mean, happy to do it online, and we'll do an in-person one in September. But yeah, lots of Jonathans. It always makes me giggle. This is the one compact group that's got so many different Jonathans. And there's normally another one, isn't there? No, just the 3 of you.
No, I think that's it. I think we're the lot.
Yeah, I think and if it finds out that loads of people are away when we do the invite, then we will maybe reschedule. Charlie, what day was it? 20?
You said 21st.
Am I right? You want me, Charlie? I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Just going to put it in the chat on you. 21st, there you go. See, I had remembered it right after our conversation this morning. There we go. My memory is not as bad as I was hoping it so. Right, fabulous. Thank you so much, Jonathan, Mark. Oh, Jonathan, the other Jonathan, another Jonathan. Hand up.
I'm just going to quickly say, if you want an in-person day out, half day out, we can. You're more than welcome over to Leamington. We can show you our cultural venues, show you some of the new capital build programs, take you to Creative Quarter if you want to do a more of a coming together event, but not now. It's too hot now.
No, well, let's aim for that in September, because we've got yourselves and Worcester, which would be a really nice different mix. So we could do September. We could do, you guys and Worcester, not together. I don't mean that. 2 separate in-person sessions between now and Christmas.
That was really useful. Really enjoyed that. Thank you.
See you later, guys. Good luck.
We can do tea and cake, Simon. Always do tea and cake.
We'll get fancy pastries as well.
Especially for the party.
Thanks, Jonathan.